Right, so today I've got some Friday opinion for you because it looks like the FIA is going back to the drawing board with the whole DRS and active aero thing, a thing that's been a point of contention amongst fans since it came in 2011. So, a quick history lesson for you. If you're new to this channel, the thing I'm known for most around here is talking about the history of motor racing and looking at the tech, controversies, great drives and tragic deaths, along with everything else in between, across all forms of motorsport, from Formula 1 to rally to touring cars to IndyCar. But I also do these opinion pieces from time to time. So, the TLDR is, in 2010, McLaren had developed this thing called the F-duct, an air intake on the nose cone of the car where the F in Vodafone was located, hence the name, and Jensen and Lewis were then able to block this vent off with their knees in a straight line. What then happened is that the F-duct, when activated, effectively stalled the rear wing. It then allowed for a slight boost in straight line speed because physics happened. And because it wasn't classed as an active aero device and done through Hamilton and Button's knee blocking off a small hole, it was totally legal, and the FIA couldn't do anything about it. The performance gains were noticeable enough that all the other teams then began to copy it. However, the FIA had to step in and say no more. It was found out later on in the season that some of the teams had got a similar system in place where the drivers were having to take their hand off the steering wheel to cover that hole, or however else they were doing it. So the FIA said that at the end of the season, the F-duct would be banned. But instead, the FIA brought in a new system for 2011 because they'd seen that this had something that could benefit the sport. So in 2011, the FIA introduced the drag reduction system, or DRS for short, and it's something that a lot of people have hated since it came in for that season. It's gimmicky, it's video gamey, it's lifted off a PlayStation game, so on. Instead of a potentially dangerous situation where drivers might have had their hand off the wheel at 200 miles an hour, the FIA had allowed for a mechanism in the rear wing that allows the main rear wing plane to open up. Instead of drag being caused by the rear wing, the air simply passes through the hole that is now open, which allows for something in the region of a 10 to 12 mile an hour increase in speed. It's no surprise then that the amount of overtakes doubled between 2010 and 2011. No, really, they doubled. Some mad lad has actually done a database for every race since 1994 and the number of on-track overtakes for those races on a race-by-race basis, and then has the totals for the season. 615 total overtakes in 2010, 1,249 for the year following, all because of Flappy McFlapface on the rear wing. It was all part of F1 being improve the show and the whole thing of we need more overtaking because it's too boring at the minute. Juan Pablo Montoya said it was the equivalent to giving Pablo Picasso Photoshop as it was making things too easy, while others criticised the fact that the guy in front had no way to defend other than having a KERS system, which had now come back for 2011, although it was optional. So fast forwarding through to now, which is obviously more important than back then, Autosport has recently reported on their Twitter page and actually on their website about how the FIA's single-seat director is now looking to improve the show by sort of changing the aero about to make overtaking more of a possibility without having to rely too much on that dreaded DRS system. Has anybody got the San Andreas meme? The here we go again one? Because here we go again. The cars, as Autosport has already written out, will be around 200mm shorter on the maximum allowed wheelbase, and 100mm narrower down to around 1.9 metres. It looks like they finally admitted that the cars are too bulky and too heavy and they need to try and get that down a bit. But what's going to happen is it's going to be like a snowball effect, if you want to call it that. A narrower car, a shorter car, means smaller Venturi tunnels, which means less downforce. So the components like the suspension parts and other bits and pieces won't have to be as rigid or as roided up to handle all of that downforce, so that in turn will also help reduce a bit of weight. And this is something that has been a bit of an issue with the ground effect cars, and I've talked about this before. Because of the nature of the cars needing to have that seal created with the ground for the downforce to be created, lobbing the car over curbs like they were able to do pre-2022 is out of the window. So what has now been created is a one-groove race. There's not much opportunity to take a corner with multiple or different lines. Silverstone might be the last place on the calendar where that sort of thing is possible. Overall downforce loss also points to less dirty air, and it's going to allow for a little bit of closer following. You're never going to get BTCC levels of bumper to bumper, or rather front wing to rear diffuser close racing, but the fact that a car can be a little bit closer through the corners will allow for them to be in a better position for attack on corner exit or going out onto a straight. But all of this then opens up, no pun intended, as to how they'll address the DRS system. They kind of want to keep it, but if the cars are now able to follow a little bit closer, coming through a corner and then out onto a straight, if they open up that rear flap, then it's a slam dunk overtake. And where's the fun in that? More overtakes does not equal better racing. Many would argue it should be the quality of the overtake than the fact that somebody has been able to breeze on by through pressing a button like it's been ripped straight out of a PlayStation game. I'm sure a lot of people watching this video or listening to this video would rather have the cars following close through, I don't know, Eau Rouge, and then, as an example, having Sainz right up the arse of Alonso, and then seeing Alonso use his 20 plus years of experience to stop Sainz from getting past, and then Sainz having to use his youth to try and do one on Alonso into Les Combes in a future is mine old man type of thing. A lot of people would rather watch that than see a slam dunk DRS overtake from 150 metres further back. The reason they want to keep the DRS is because they don't want to have this situation where overtaking becomes impossible again. They want to actually have it there in case they need it, rather than because they have to have it type of thing. And there are actually a couple of ways that they can keep the system and sort of, or make it actually still have competitive racing. The first option is to have a variable system. At high downforce tracks, you can have the thing wide open and get the most reduction in drag possible. So at places like Hungary, it's actually effective. And then at places like Monza, Baku, Silverstone, Montreal, where top speeds can be pretty high, you wind it back a little bit. You know, actually use some wind tunnel testing to try and figure it all out. Or do some sort of success ballast with it. Teams like Red Bull get a significant reduction in flap openage, like, I don't know, I'm going to pick an arbitrary number here, a 3cm gap. While Sauber get a 10cm opening, or something like that. And this all changes based off the results of the previous Grand Prix. But reading this back, it sounds like BOP, and no Formula 1 fan is ever going to want that. Also, how do you prevent sandbagging? And also, how do you do it on a track-by-track basis? Because all the cars are different. The FIA's single-seat director, Nicholas Tombazis, actually said in regards to this, there will be something equivalent to the current DRS, which will basically enable the following car that is within a certain limit to potentially get in a position to attack. What form that mechanism will take, whether it will be an additional change of an aerodynamic component on the straight, or an additional change of the aerodynamic component in the corner, or whether it will be part of the energy of the engine, which of the three, we're still doing our best simulations to arrive at the best possible solution. What we don't want to have is cars basically diving past each other on the straight. We want cars arriving close to each other at the braking point and there being a fight, and drivers having to use their skill. And again, that's what we would rather see, isn't it? Say Hamilton and Alonso fighting each other, the two most experienced drivers on the grid going at it, and it being just like a show of how good F1 drivers can be, rather than just having one blast past the other with the press of a button. Okay, we're not going to get Bahrain 2014 every single race out of this, but it makes F1 look a lot better than PlayStation racing, to coin a phrase. The final option they can use, and Tombazis actually brushed upon this in the previous quote that I read out, is a straightforward push to pass like they have in IndyCar and had in DTM as well. Have something where its use is per lap or a set amount of time for the whole race, 200 seconds or something, again, arbitrary number, all tied into the hybrid. You know how they have a certain amount of energy the hybrid can dump per lap? Have the push to pass tie into that. So if the legal cap normally is 10 megajoules, again, an arbitrary number, have the push to pass allow a brief squirt of 13 megajoules. 2026 rules are saying that the battery power is going up from 150 kilowatts to 350 kilowatts. So somehow tie it in there? Okay, I'm not an engineer. I fear that I'm starting to fall into the just do thing that a lot of people online fall into. Just do this. Just do that. Just ban. It's not anywhere near as simple as it seems. But I can see one problem with using push to pass. That's an IndyCar thing. F1 has DRS. DRS is F1's thing. There's no way in hell that Formula 1 will want to be seen taking something from IndyCar and slapping it on their cars. Because we're not IndyCar! IndyCar engines are also not the same as F1 engines, so implementing the battery deployed to the hybrid might be tricky. I know IndyCar is moving, well, supposed to be moving, because they've been delaying that about as often as the actual IndyCar game was delayed, and they're going to be using like super capacitors or something like that to do the push to pass when all of that eventually comes in. I would not want to be around if one of those ever shorts out. But looking at what Autosport has written here, particularly with things regarding the weights of the cars, a 50 kilo drop in weight will be a when I see it type of thing. A 50 kilogram drop in the car weight will still be bordering on 3/4 of a ton, but a lighter car will be a bit more responsive at least. And let's be honest, we're kidding ourselves senseless if we think that an F1 car is ever going to be 600 kilos again. Less bulky, narrower cars that can use more track. They're also going to go back to 15-inch rims that are lighter as well, and in turn they're going to have tyres that aren't just painted on. A narrower, shorter car will produce less dirty air, and the FIA is looking to close loopholes that allow teams to create dirty as possible cars. On the surface of it all, it looks a good way of doing things. On paper, things are looking good. But will it mean slower cars? I know that's a concern that some people might have, but even if they're 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 5 seconds slower than what they are now, they're still going to be the fastest thing around a track, so this obsession with the fastest lap times isn't something you really need to concern yourself with, and they actually think that the times aren't going to be that far off. Tom Bassis said on this front, the 2023 season had a small worsening of the close racing features. The cars had degraded a bit in their ability to follow each other closely, and we think we understand why, how, and what we need to do. The plan is for less downforce and drag, and current simulations do not point to lap times being dramatically worse than they are now. It's really not a huge factor, it's going to be very close to now. I think we're going to be within a couple of seconds or something like that, but even if it was 5 seconds slower, we're not going to be sweating too much. We're not going to be seeing much until July next year really, but while it looks like the FIA wants to switch things up, it seems like another radical change after not many years. 2014 they had this rule set, and then they radically changed the cars in 2017. Then they radically changed them again for 2022, although it was supposed to come in earlier if not for the pandemic. Now they're going to try and do it again. Okay, it's not as much of a radical change as 2014 to 2017 was, or the ones that they did in 2022, but it still feels like another hit of the reset button to try and get something to work. Another case of lobbing stuff at the wall and hoping it sticks. But what do you think? So then, a look at what F1 wants to do with Aero when the 2026 engine regulations kick in. If this thing has made you think things about the thing, then like this thing so the algorithm can do its thing. And for more things like this, get subscribed with the bell thing on so you never miss out on anything that I do around here. Massive thanks to the rad lads at Patreon for the continued support, and if you want to help contribute to the picture purchasing piggy bank, then a link to Patreon is in the description, along with links to Discord, socials, and affiliate links. End of season sale now on at the F1 store, link in the description. Or there's super thanks and memberships if you want to support there too. So until next time, I've been AdmiralLaWind, have a great day wherever you are, and goodbye.